definitely brings solace. It definitely helps us get through. Poetry also gives witness. The poet's job is to keep her eyes wide open, to bear the price of grief and sorrow, and to say what seems most true. Lately, I have been writing some poems about that emperor, who I call our charlatan president. And these poems do not sing. There's no lantern in them swinging through darkness, but cradling a child still might lean me toward light. How big is the heart that stays open when faith is only found in spring blossoms, but then takes leave? So I've been writing about that charlatan president. And in one of his recent tweets, he said, and I quote, "We open up our great country." Open up our great country is in capital letters. "And it will be sooner rather than later. The horror of the invisible enemy, except for those that sadly lost a family member or friend, must be quickly forgotten." I wrote, quickly forgotten, except for those who went hungry, except for the bereft children you sent back to suffer or die, except for the workers who put the dead into body bags and freezer trucks, except for the doctors and nurses and workers who did not have protective equipment, except for the degradation of the air we breathe because you took the pandemic as an opportunistic infection to spread your toxic agenda, except that your prescription for amnesia is what siphons the greatness from the America you are unmaking. This unfolding story of our times is asking, I think, all of us for narratives that speak to the injustices, to the deep, unbearable losses, to those without shelter, to those who are hungry, and to those who are present in our world by the millions who are already caught in harm's way. And yet, and this is from my direct experience, walk with more dignity and more humility through their struggles than many of our, quote, leaders. So we know as storytellers, as poets, as citizens, and certainly we know from history that silence and inaction allow the shadow to grow larger. In many years of working with the children of war and other young people navigating their way through trauma and recovery, I am very aware of the near and present dangers of this time. So that's pretty much where I'm living. It's what I'm writing about. But not to worry, because I'm also writing about solace and joy, not only sorrow. So I have put together, as I said, some new work and some old work, and I'll keep at it right now. And I have a quote here that I've always loved, and it's by a poet named Stanley Kunitz, who lived to be 100 years old. He was also an avid gardener, and I will talk about gardening later in this reading. And Stanley Kunitz was his name. And he said, "The heart breaks and breaks and lives by breaking. It is necessary to go through dark and deeper dark and not to turn." I'm going to read that again. "The heart breaks and breaks and lives by breaking. It is necessary to go through dark and deeper dark and not to turn." So I'm still with the darkness here a little bit, and I am paying attention, and I do listen to the news. On March 5th, in the state of Alabama, a man named Nathaniel Woods was executed. there was a tremendous amount of evidence that he was innocent. The U.S. Supreme Court actually stayed the execution, but the 75-year-old governor of Alabama, named Kay Ivey, put it forward, and it happened against a great deal of objection and protest. And before I read the poem, I want you to know that Kay Ivey is one of the main authors, ironically, of something called the Human Life Protection Act. And that act puts Alabama on the map for having the most restrictive abortion ban in the entire country. And that ban includes a ban on abortion in cases of rape and incest, and physicians who perform abortions illegally, making all abortions illegally, it is considered a felony and they could be sentenced to life imprisonment. So this little poem here is called Alabama Governor Executes Nathaniel Woods. Kay Ivey is 75 years old. She loves the Human Life Protection Act. She loves to close her eyes to the unforgivable act of murdering Nathaniel Woods, but prides herself with protecting the unborn conceived in incest or rape. They tell me I must not write a polemic. There must be craft in a political poem. Perhaps it should sing. But the white blossoms, wild and unkempt, twisted on a small lane just across my street, adding their newborn apple-scented dreams to the air, tell me nothing that offers solace. When I think of Kay Ivey in the old Alabama mansion, still going strong with murdering one more innocent black man while loving herself for protecting human life. So I want to balance that poem a little bit when I'm here in front of the campfire and give honor to a great poet from a nearby state, Wendell Berry, who's from Kentucky. May he live well with Mitch McConnell as his senator. And this poem is a poem beloved to many people, and I think a really important poem of comfort and solace for these times. Again, it's by Wendell Berry, and it's called The Peace of Wild Things. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. The Peace of Wild Things by Wendell Berry. But I'm balancing here in front of the campfire tonight between sorrow and solace. And we all know, or we should know, that while we're living in this pandemic, the president of this country is unraveling many things that protect us, including one after another of environmental regulations. So I wrote this poem called What Could Be Gone, because it could be, and we must not let it. What could be gone? A place where winter still has her way with the pulse of bare branches, where she freezes the song in a rocky creek until it can sing again, where she knows what remains that cannot be tamed, where the taste of cold air is wild and holy. In this place, there is still spring, an unruly green uprising, and there is summer with her soft collapse of rose petals and corn stalks standing tall, offering their praise to the sun. And there is autumn with her bright plumes moving in October wind, once triumphant flags, now waving a warning at the ones who will not protect this place. Too soon will only the stars fling our sorrow back to earth. Well, I knew that I would be in front of a campfire, but I didn't know I would be surrounded with such beautiful woods. But thinking that maybe I would, and knowing that dusk was coming, and wanting to keep this balance between solace and sorrow, I'm going to read another poem by a different poet named James Wright. And this poem that he wrote is called Trying to Pray. Trying to pray. This time, I have left my body behind me, crying in its dark thorns. Still, there are good things in this world. It is dusk. It is the good darkness of women's hands that touch loaves. The spirit of a tree begins to move. I touch leaves. I close my eyes and think of water. So I love the line in that poem of women's hands that touch loaves. And what I did put in my bio is that I am a reputable baker, and it's true. And one of the things I'm doing, and I'm sure all of you are doing many wonderful things to make this time rich and meaningful, is I'm baking so much bread and cooking so much good food. And I have a poem here called Baking Bread. And this poem is one of many poems I write about the work I do. So it's my honor to work with young refugees and immigrants. They really are the children of war. Many are undocumented, asylum seekers. So I'm in the thick of it with this president. The president breaks my heart. He outrages me. And this is a poem I really wrote in honor of these young people. And before COVID, this poem takes a dig at the restaurants where the rich eat. And now all restaurants are closed, but hunger's increased. So the poem still stands, and the rich are still getting rich. And I'll read the poem. It's called Baking Bread, and it has a quote here by Roque Dalton, who is no longer alive, and he was from El Salvador, a beautiful revolutionary poet. Roque Dalton wrote, "I believe poetry, like bread, is for everyone in the unanimous blood of those who struggle." Breaking bread. I don't know much about the bread that Abdi, Farah, and Hodan, my students from Somalia, eat. I don't know what ingredients are needed into the dough of their survival. I don't know if it's flatbread or risen. Farah writes how he can still see children playing a jumping game, caught in a leaping moment, lifted from blood-stained streets. Hodan says her blood is lost because it still belongs to the flag of her Somali star. Abdi tells me his mother has sworn him to secrecy, how his father has already used an entire month's earnings with what will surprise him and will be his first suit for graduation. Abdi, whose heart is like a beautiful fruit, tender and exposed, who tells me he believes this is an America that will allow him to become a lawyer for truth and justice, even a judge. Children of goat's milk, red dust, stringy chicken, scarcity of grain and water. I know the Somali wind that once sang your lullabies is a cutthroat wanderer who drifts in each night with his blood smell of tribal battle. Thinking of Somalia, brown hands over open fires, bread shared in a circle of wizened eyes, hungers beyond my imagining. My thoughts leap to a restaurant table in Seattle, though it could be San Francisco, Sun Valley, Aspen, New York, with a waiter who says, "My name is Josh and I'll be your server tonight," where the privileged dip their ciabatta in truffle oil and read the menu novellas, assuring themselves of ingredients sourced for their pleasure. King Midas gold in the egg yolks, plump chickens plucked on the name brand farm. What if the next fad pulls its self-important palate away from the local and organic, featuring food from war zones, packaged for the hungers of the well-fed? It could happen. It could happen that the bread of struggle will be sold as the empathy of eating. I want to tell Farah, Hodan, and Abdi that I know about chickens, how they lay eggs warm in the hands with yolks that are simply determined truths of yellow. That I am not impressed with the notion of slow food because many of us already know whatever is at high speed is dangerous. And we don't need Josh to tell us what the old Somali farmers' hands have been doing for centuries, that I wish Abdi could become a judge, and that good bread and its unanimous communion would be what we learn to break together. And I've never read this poem right in front of an open fire. That was really special for me, really fun. And excuse me for wiping my face and my eyes, but I'm in front of this fire and it's smoky, so thank you for forgiving me for that. Again, the juxtapositions, we're in Vashon. For the most part, we're safe, we're sheltered, it's beautiful here. And I think of that a lot when I'm cooking in my farmhouse kitchen, which I love to do, but I can't shake that suffering that I know is beyond the borders or in the next county or right here on the island that mostly we don't see. And so I wrote this poem that has some new meanings because we're so oddly sheltered in place. Most of us are fine, not all. And yet there's a rise in hunger for children, breaking all records all over this country besides the world. This is called Kitchen Confidential. It's me in my kitchen. Steam curls itself into my kitchen windows, dampens and sugars the air. The canning vat, volcanic. I know this rhythm. Bubbling heat, the importance of timing, 5 minutes needed to process fruit at sea level. You will fare well in my kitchen, or a cornmeal dumpling with freshly picked blueberries puckered beneath golden crust surprises you with cardamom, lime, and cassis. Guarded recipes for keeping the hungry mouth of the world's pain on the other side of the kitchen door. Yet, when my timer rings, I know a different device for keeping time is calibrated to the minute's explosion, and in a kitchen halfway across the world, another woman's spices and hopes are ground down to nothing. It takes a cornmeal dumpling 20 minutes at 375 degrees, blast of warmth in my face, leaning into the oven, while a car bomb with incinerating heat closes in on open stalls, market baskets filled with olives, almonds, and eggplants, women and children running for shelter. Everything scatters. Why not? get lost in what we love. The world hurts us anyway. How else to provide a feathered taste of sweetness, but allow a morning's work of preserving to shine through glass jars, this pinch of unviolated joy, while we know the ingredients that haunt the world, the ingredients for violence that haunt the world are without measure. And again, I'm balancing those very sober thoughts, which I imagine we all have, with some joy and celebration. So in Kitchen Confidential, I refer to canning, and this is sort of a drunken with happiness poem about making plum jam, which I do in that same kitchen. It's called A Poem to Loved Ones About Preserving Fruit. Have you ever woken up on a dark winter morning, suffering from the sun's neglect, wishing for a ripe plum as you felt your empty mouth curve purple and sweet around the memory of sticky sun? Late last summer and into fall, I knew I was held in fortune's unpredictable embrace as I gathered baskets of our wind-fallen plums during a string of September's Palomino mornings. Light on my feet, intoxicated with the bounty of gathering bushels of dusk blue plums until they filled my coffers and kettles. I knew as I washed glass jars, scalded rings and lids, that I was star-laced, sun-blessed, and moon-crossed to find myself in the stirred-up kitchen and crush, mash, mix, boil, sweat, sweeten, stoop down, swoop up, scoop, funnel, and strain in a bewitchery of preserving what is given. So I'm going to read just a couple more things here by this beautiful fire, and thank you again to Bonnie and Lori and Simon and Sarah. My grandfather was a master gardener and deeply influenced my love of gardening. I know that on Vashon, many share that common love. And this poem really is for him. He gave me a lifelong legacy of love for the earth and for gardening. This poem is called Farmer's Market at the Autumn Equinox. Even here, with yellow-leafed wind and baskets heaped with saucers of squash, bunched arugula, red and gold peppers, we know the news of the day. Wars against children, tax cuts for the rich, a gunslinging country, environmental assault. It doesn't stop. But this morning, if I must think of what's gone bad, let it be a bruised eggplant, an apple with a worm. Let me hear the tambourine of the moon as it lights the way for the corn to rise up. Slight breeze through my basket's weave fills with memories, travels in me as if from the thin roots of carrots to the leafy tops, and I am with my grandfather as he listens to the small song of a seed before planting it. Kneeling to earth, he asks the seed how it wants to flower. Tonight, I will dream of him. I will dream of my grandfather. Dream he has cupped his hands around mine, and between us we hold a luminous sliver of prayer for what the world could still become. So when I began this reading, which I am about to conclude, I talked about the idea I had written that there was no lantern swinging to the darkness. But actually, I refuse to give in to despair. I resist despair as much as I hope in my life. I resist injustice. And so I recently, no more than a week ago, wrote this poem as an act of hope. And it's called Lighting Our Way. And I want to thank everybody again who's listening, and thank you for this beautiful setting. And what a delight and unusual experience, like everything else in this pandemic, to read in this setting. Thank you so much. This is called Lighting Our Way. There was a place where I once jumped in between rhymes of a double Dutch rope, a sidewalk chalked in colors leading to sky blue, a blue bicycle where I knew how fast I could pedal, where my legs understood how to take me home, swift and unafraid. What if we each swung a secret lantern through any darkness, showing us the way back to the tingling of dusk as only children know it, just before night thickens, when the first firefly is cradled in our hands. I want to believe it would help us remember how to light our way. Thank you so much. The thing